I inserted the key into the lock like I did every day, but it wouldn't turn. I tried the spare key. Still nothing. Standing there in confusion outside the house I had lived in for nearly 40 years. I called my son. He picked up, paused for a few seconds, then said one single sentence, "Mom, Ava and I changed the locks. You don't live there anymore." That day, I had just come back from the funeral of my classmate from senior fitness, Linda, 72 years old. I'm 72. Every time someone passes, I tell myself I still have time. I still have things to do. I still have family. I didn't cry much at the funeral, but standing in front of the house, facing a door that wouldn't open anymore, my tears started falling on their own. My name is Martha Sullivan. I'm 72 years old, retired, a widow. I lived alone in a cream-colored wooden house in a small town called Elmridge. My husband Jack and I bought it when I was pregnant with our first son, Noah. When Jack died of heart failure, I raised Noah on my own in that house. We were never rich, but our home was always full of laughter. I once asked him, "When you grow up, are you going to sell this house?" He hugged me and said, "Of course not. Mom, I grew up here. This is home." I believed him. Noah grew up, did well in school, and went to college far away. I took out a second mortgage to help pay his tuition. Then he married Ava, a blonde girl who was always polite but never truly warmed toward me. I welcomed her. I never meddled in their business. A few months ago, Noah started talking about how Mom needs someone to look after her. Ava began dropping by unannounced, peeking around the kitchen, asking if I'd taken my pills, putting on a face of concern. I understood. They were starting to plan, but I never thought they would do it like this, waiting until I went to a funeral, then changing the locks, like tossing out an old cat. No warning, no goodbye hug. No, let me decide for myself. I stood there under the midday sun. My phone is still in my hand trembling. My heart froze. I asked, "So, where exactly do I fit into your plan?" Noah replied, "We've set up a room for you, just for a while. Then, you'll move into Sunrise Hills retirement home. You'll love it there. Mom, there's a garden and senior yoga classes." I let out a dry laugh. The last time I did yoga was in 1988, and I don't need anyone locking me up anywhere. I was a school teacher for 30 years. I stood in front of classrooms full of wild teenagers and kept my cool. But now, I don't know how to stay balanced anymore. Not because I'm old, but because I've been betrayed by the very person I trusted most. If it were you, if your own child changed the locks on your home without telling you, what would you do? Stay silent and accept it, or stand up and take back your voice? I sat alone in a temporary room at a cheap motel. The 4 white walls had yellowed over time, and the curtains flapped with every gust slipping through the window crack. Out in the hallway, someone had the TV blaring some ad for medicine, mixed with a hoarse voice muttering lines I couldn't make out. I didn't care. The room was cold, but my heart was colder. That night, I didn't cry, but the emptiness was so heavy it felt hard to breathe. I lay on my side, eyes on the dim ceiling light, and my mind drifted back to the warm glow of the kitchen I used to call mine, the place where I baked pumpkin bread for Noah every fall, where he'd sit doing his homework, leaning his back against my legs, eyes wide when he asked, "How do you know all the answers?" Mom, back then, he believed in me like I was a superhero. Now, he sees me as a problem that needs to be handled quickly, cleanly, and without fuss. I started replaying everything like a chess game I had unknowingly lost. Maybe it hadn't started today. Maybe it began in the tiniest of details I brushed off. Ava, my daughter-in-law, used to drop by unannounced. She called them quick check-ins, but her eyes always swept around the house. One time, I was boiling pasta when she walked in, frowned at the bubbling pot, and sighed. "You still cook by yourself," I remember answering. "Who else would I cook with?" She laughed but didn't reply. That look in her eyes was part pity, part calculation. I've never forgotten it. The next morning, I woke up early and had coffee alone at a small cafe near the bus terminal. I was still shaking a little, but inside, something was starting to steady. I knew clearly that staying silent was no longer an option, because if I didn't speak up now, it wouldn't be long before they took the rest of my life piece by piece, as if I were just property. I reached into my purse and pulled out the old leather-bound notebook I always carried, which was the only thing I'd managed to keep from my home. Inside, I had written down every support I'd ever given Noah over the years, $12,000 for his freshman year of college, $3,500 for the wedding, $8,000 I gave him to invest in that emerging financial opportunity. Not once did I ask for any of it back, but now I wanted, at the very least, to be acknowledged. I scrolled through my contacts, my fingers stopping at the name Jasmine Bell, an old student of mine who is now a lawyer. I called Ms. Sullivan. Her voice was still as quick and bright as ever. "I'm listening. I don't even remember what I said first. Probably. I need help," because after a pause, Jasmine simply said, "Give me 30 minutes. I'll be there." That afternoon, in a cafe across the wooden bridge, I met Jasmine again. She wore a gray suit, her hair neatly pinned up, but her smile was still as warm as the girl who once turned in late homework because her baby brother was sick. I told her everything. No drama, no self-pity, just the plain truth, exactly as it happened. She listened the whole time without interrupting. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a notebook. "Do you have the house documents?" "All in my purse," I said. Jasmine nodded, jotting notes. They had no right to do this, and we're going to make that clear. If you're still here, maybe you've felt the sting of being pushed out of your own life, too. Maybe someone once called you useless when all you ever wanted was love. If so, you're not alone. Hit follow on the Revenge Hub. Here, we tell the stories of ordinary people who were pushed to the edge and then stood back up to reclaim themselves, not out of spite, but to restore justice through the quietest kind of strength clarity. That night, when I returned to my motel room, I shut the door, locked it, and switched on the light for the first time in 2 nights. The room was still shabby, but this time, I saw something clearly. I wasn't here because I'd been cast out. I was here, getting ready to come back. Our first confrontation didn't happen in a courtroom or even a lawyer's office. It happened in a family diner, polished wooden tables, the gentle clinking of cutlery, and the smell of grilled meat mixing with the sharp edge of early winter air. Noah sat across from me, wearing a wrinkled white shirt and a gray suit jacket. His tie was crooked, his eyes sunken, probably hadn't slept. His hand gripped the coffee cup so tight his knuckles turned white. I had never seen him like that. He was no longer the boy afraid of bad grades, no longer the confident man with a plan. Sitting in front of me was someone on the verge of falling apart. "I know you're angry, Mom," Noah began, his voice soft, avoiding eye contact. "But I did this because I was worried about you. Living alone, The gas stove, the stairs, your medication. You forget things. Don't you see that? I answered slowly. Noah, we don't have stairs. He went quiet. I continued. And the reason I missed my meds was because Ava moved the pillbox and didn't tell me. I'm not senile. Noah, I'm just not great at playing hide and seek with my vitamins. Noah looked up at me, eyes welling with tears. I'm sorry. It's not just because you changed the locks, I said, keeping my tone even. It's because you planned to push me out of the very house I built with no explanation, no conversation, just waiting for me to step out the door. Between us, the coffee had gone cold. What remained was the truth and a folder I placed on the table, a copy of the house deed, bank statements, and a few recorded snippets from kitchen conversations, moments Noah thought I wasn't listening. Noah opened it, hands trembling. He read about the small investment, and he convinced me to make $8,000 with no follow-up. Read about the $400, then $800 withdrawn from a secondary account, each time called a temporary borrow. I never asked, not until now. I was going to pay it back, he said, like that made any of it better. I just needed more time. I nodded. Time, I understand. I pulled out a photocopy of a bank loan application with my name listed as co-signer, a loan I never signed, but the fingerprint matched. I also think you need time, I said, to figure out how my signature got on here when I've never even been to that branch. Noah froze, his face drained of color. His hand stalled on the paper. Mom, you hired a lawyer. No, Noah. I looked him straight in the eye. I teach lawyers. That was the first time my son saw me, not as the gentle mother he could cajole, not as the fragile old woman, but as someone who taught others how to analyze, reason, and rise after betrayal. A week later, Ava showed up unannounced. She wore a long wool dress and full makeup, but her eyes betrayed the fatigue. I didn't know Noah did all that, she said flatly. The loans, the signature stuff. I just thought you shouldn't live alone anymore. I wasn't trying to kick you out, but I can't carry the fallout if this gets out. I didn't reply. I asked, You want me to withdraw the complaint? Ava clenched her purse. If possible, let Noah deal with it quietly. Don't let the press get involved. My family, we have a reputation. I gave a soft chuckle. Your family has a reputation. But what about my mother and father, the ones who left me the money to buy that house? Did they have a reputation when I was cast out like I was invisible? Ava didn't answer. I stood up and reached for my coat. You don't need to. I've heard enough. Some wounds don't require knives or screaming, just a silent action, averted eyes, a door closing. As for me, I'm no longer standing there, waiting for that door to open again. I went back to the bank on Monday morning, dark coat, hair neatly tied up, and an old but sturdy leather bag in hand. Inside were all the documents I needed: a savings book, house deed, bank statements, and a small folder carefully wrapped in a plastic sleeve. The branch office was bright and warm, a complete contrast to the cold dread I carried with me the last time. The manager, Mr. Graham, recognized me immediately. He was polite and courteous, but there was a flicker of unease in his eyes. How can we help you today? Ma'am, I set the bag down and looked him straight in the eye. I want to revoke all access my son has to any of my accounts, immediately. No threats, no shouting, just the firm voice of a mother who had had enough. Mr. Graham nodded and called for support staff. 30 minutes later, every account was secured with a new passcode. No more back doors left open behind me. That afternoon, I sat in the office of Jasmine, one of my former students who used to drop her pen every time she handed in homework. Now, she was a licensed attorney running a small but professional firm, drafting the first warning letter to be sent to Noah. I read every line slowly clear, respectful, but firm enough to make the recipient understand that if they kept underestimating me, there would be real consequences. "Shall we send it to his home or workplace first?" Jasmine asked. I paused for a moment. Workplace. If there's anything Noah still fears, it's how others see him. Jasmine didn't smile. She just nodded, then signed the letter. That evening, I returned to my house. The door hadn't been broken. No one was lurking in the shadows like I'd imagined the night before. Everything was still in its place, but something had changed. I had changed. I opened all the windows to let the wind in. I cleaned out the kitchen cabinets, straightened the bedding. I picked up every last item that Noah and Ava had left behind: a few photos, some business books, and a crumpled sticky note in my grandchild's messy handwriting. I packed them all away carefully, not to throw out, but not to keep nearby either. This was no longer a space to preserve other people's memories. This was a place for me to begin again. The next morning, the bank sent me a notification. A mortgage loan attempt on the house under my name had been denied due to a missing signature. I sat still, my cup of tea going cold in my hands. Noah had tried and failed. If I hadn't taken the initiative to review the documents and shut things down, by now, the house I was sitting in might have already belonged to some bank. I opened my laptop, logged into social media, and typed a few lines with no tags or names. Just this: some things may seem small, like a signature, but sometimes a single signature can hold your whole life together. That night, I got a message from Ava. Still that cold, polite tone. "We hope you remain calm. We're trying to arrange things in a reasonable way. We hope you understand." I didn't respond. I just set the phone down, returned to the old armchair where I used to read, and sat there for a long, long time, long enough to finally hear one thing clearly in my heart. I wasn't afraid of them anymore. 1 month passed slowly. No more drama, no threatening letters, no midnight phone calls. These were quiet, simple days where I woke up early to make tea, tended to the flower pots that had wilted from neglect, and read books without glancing at the window, wondering if someone was out there watching. Noah never called again. Ava sent one brief email politely, to the point of being soulless and apologizing for our inappropriate behavior. I didn't reply, but I printed it out and filed it with my legal documents. Even a thin apology has value, especially when it's recorded in the right place. Then, one Sunday, Killian, my eldest grandson, showed up at my door. He stood awkwardly on the porch, holding a bunch of wildflowers. "I didn't know if I'd be allowed to see you," he said, avoiding my eyes. "But I miss your apple pie." I opened the door. I didn't say a word, but I stepped aside to let him in. We drank tea and baked together. While the pie was baked, Killian talked about the tension at home, about the silence between his parents, about how Noah no longer looked up from his evening glass of wine, about Tag, his little sister, who'd all but moved into her college dorm and refused to call home. "I don't know whose side I'm supposed to be on," Killian sighed. I miss how it felt when we were little. Sunday nights, all of us in your kitchen, laughing, no one scared of anyone getting angry." I held his hand. "You don't have to pick sides. You just have to choose kindness." A week later, I sent out dinner invitations to the whole family. No pressure. No conditions. Just a handwritten card, the way I used to do it when I was young. Sunday dinner, 6 o'clock. If there's anything worth holding on to, come. And strangely, they came. Noah and Ava walked in last, not holding hands, not saying a word, but they came. Tag brought dessert. Killian helped set the table. No one mentioned the past. But the silence between conversations no longer felt heavy. It was like a collective exhalation, lighter after the storm. After dinner, when everyone was leaving, Noah stayed behind. He stood in the kitchen, fingers gently rubbing a potholder I'd knitted years ago. "You'll never forgive me, will you?" he asked, voice hoarse. I washed dishes and replied slowly, "Forgiveness isn't something I hang like a prize. It's a process. You don't need me to forgive you. You need to face yourself." He nodded, eyes downcast. "I'm starting over. Small job, low pay, but at least I know where to start now." I placed the last plate on the rack. Good. Because once you understand what you've lost, you finally learn how to hold on. I don't need to win. I just need to live right in the house I built from tears, from sacrifice, from a lifetime of never giving up. No one's changing the locks anymore. No one's standing outside my life. I've come back. And this time, I'm staying. Not because anyone has allowed me to, but because I chose to. If this story touched something in you, a quiet ache, a silence you've never spoken aloud, or a memory of being pushed out of your own life, don't let it pass like just another video. Share this story. Leave a comment if you've ever been through something similar. And if you want to keep hearing stories like this, journeys of rising after betrayal, don't forget to subscribe to the Revenge Hub. We don't tell these stories to stir anger. We tell them to remind you you have the right to stand back up, and you are not alone.